Shelley, thank you for the kind introduction. I'm very, very happy to be here this morning to talk about two organizations that are very near and dear to my heart: the Israel Defense Forces and Yashar L'Chayal. As I listened to your introduction, it sounded as though my life progressed smoothly from one stage to the next, but as we all know, it never quite works out that way. As I walked in this morning, I was reminded of my conservative shul in suburban Philadelphia, my Jewish upbringing. I attended Camp Ramah in the summers and the Kibbutz Hebrew Academy through high school. During the first half of my junior year, I and the majority of my class studied in Israel. Now you should know that I'm a determined guy. So when my parents came to visit, I said, "Let me tell you what I'm going to do after high school." Now in my family, we've always had very open and honest communication. So my dad said, "Okay, tell me what you think you're going to do after high school." I proudly told him that I was going to enlist in the IDF. My father thanked me for sharing that with him, and in very clear, uncertain terms, advised me that I would be going to college after high school, which I did. But we also understood that following my college graduation, my future would be my own, and I would be making the decisions moving forward. So I decided to join the IDF. Now my mother made me promise not to join the tank brigade. My father simply asked me not to volunteer for anything. Shortly after my induction, we were asked to select our unit preferences. When the sergeant suggested tanks, I told him I can't. I promised my mother. He looked back at me with a smile. "Well, if you promise your mother, we'll make sure you get to infantry." And I want you to know that serving in the Israeli infantry was one of the greatest and most fulfilling experiences of my life. Early in my basic training, the company first sergeant called in all of the Americans. There were 7 of us in a company of 180 men. "It's cold and it's getting colder," he said to us. "We're going to need hats, gloves, and fleeces. We do not have the money. If you know any Americans who can help, now's the time to call and put them in touch with Leon." That was my introduction to Yashar L'Chayal. Now I've mentioned that I'm a pretty determined guy. So when I looked at the other 6 Americans, I realized that if I wanted to be warm, it was probably up to me. Immediately after that meeting, I called my parents, who spoke with other family members, and all wrote checks. When I got off base, I drafted an email which was widely distributed. We raised sufficient funds to provide the entire company with fleeces during the winter and camelbacks in the summer. Not only did it do the heart good, but I never experienced cold like the nights in Gaza, and I never experienced heat like summer in the West Bank. When my service ended, most of the Israelis with whom I served remained in the army. That was not an easy time for me. It was especially difficult when my closest friends were preparing to invade Gaza during Pillar of Defense. I tried to re-enlist against my parents' wishes, but the army did not have any place to put me, and I truly felt helpless. This was November on the border with the Gaza Strip. I know what it felt like. I was there. I knew what the guys needed. So with an expanded email list, I raised $15,000 and provided the 600 soldiers of my battalion with socks, underwear, gloves, hats, toothpaste, deodorant, and more. It wasn't the same as being there, but it was the best that I could do for my friends. I'm here to tell you that what Yashar L'Chayal provides to these soldiers are not luxuries. They are essential to the safety and comfort of those who serve. I was just in Israel in December. Prior to my trip, I wanted to catch up with my friend Shai. He is now the commander of our battalion's Humvee unit. I asked Shai if there's anything that he or his soldiers needed. He said that while riding in open-air Humvees, the cold and wind burns your face, not to mention getting hit by dust and debris. He asked if I knew anybody that could help. They needed thermal masks for everybody in the unit. It was $200. Just $200 made all the difference to these 30 soldiers. In addition to visiting Shai's Humvee unit, I traveled to several bases with Leon, the face of Yashar l'Chayal. To see how Leon was welcomed, the warmth, the outpouring of emotion, it really makes you understand on a human level how important Yashar l'Chayal is. When Leon and I concluded our visit in Jerusalem, we were on our way back to Jerusalem. He received a phone call. The sergeant major on the other end went on to describe the unfortunate home life of one of the soldiers in his unit. A scene all too familiar in the IDF. The young man is a combat soldier serving on a search and rescue ship in the Israeli Navy. He's the third of 5 children in an Ethiopian family struggling to get by. With a mother who barely speaks Hebrew and 2 young sisters at home, this young man and his 2 older brothers are responsible for taking care of the family. At ages 18 and 20, our soldier and one of his brothers are still in their mandatory 3 years, and as combat soldiers are making less than minimum wage. At age 23, the eldest brother is responsible for supporting the entire family, in addition to being a full-time student. Their father is not in the picture. In the sergeant major's words, aside from the 4 walls, there was almost nothing in the apartment. He told us that he had personally asked a Navy technician to repair the family's refrigerator and toaster oven. Just 2 of many items in the family's apartment that was well past their useful life. After hanging up with the sergeant major, Leon got to work. By the time we returned to Jerusalem, he had placed an order for a refrigerator, a full-size oven, and a microwave. Our soldier's family had the appliances within 48 hours. Yashar l'Chayal is an organization with a huge heart and the ability to make an enormous difference in the lives of Israel's soldiers. Not next week, not next month, today. I'd like to close with my favorite IDF story. As you all know, Israel is about the size of the state of New Jersey. This might be hard for some of you, but I want you to imagine your children serving on the borders of the state of New Jersey with their cell phones. Now, contrary to my father's wishes, I had volunteered. I had volunteered for duty on a forward observation post on the border with the Gaza Strip. At this point, there were 4 guys from tanks and 6 of us from infantry. One morning, as we came off of a shift, we overheard a conversation between one of the tankers and his mother. It started with, "Mom, are you kidding me?" It turns out that due to our demanding schedule, this young tanker had neglected to call his mother for 3 days. Forget serving on the border with Gaza, that's a nightmare enough for some of you, I'm sure. Worried, but instead of waiting to hear that something had happened to her son, she contacted the local office responsible for notifying families of injury, capture, or death. The officer with whom she spoke assured her that even on the border with Gaza, nothing had happened to her son, but promised her that he would be calling shortly. The officer called the battalion commander the company commander called the platoon commander grabbed the sergeant said, "Call your mother." For the young men and women guarding Israel's borders, and for the mothers at home worrying about them, please help keep our soldiers warm. Excuse me. I was doing all right up until now. Please help keep our soldiers warm and help keep them safe. Truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for supporting Yashar l'Chayal.